All right, Ryan, what first comes to your mind when you think of a crisis?
When I think of a crisis, I think of financial crisis, 2008 crash, as well as the economy now. With 7.2% inflation rate, I feel like a crisis is something that's going to be detrimental towards your health and towards your future. So that's what I think of when I think of crisis.
Great, thank you, Ryan. All right, Nick, what comes to your mind when you think of a crisis?
When I think of a crisis, specifically, I think of strategy. I think of ways to kind of resolve the crisis. Resolution's a big word that comes to mind. Really just being on your toes and fixing it.
Great, thank you. All right. What comes to your mind when you first think of the word crisis?
I think of like natural disasters, hurricanes, tornadoes. A crisis is something that like you can't control, that affects your life in an unchangeable way. Yeah,
Great, thank you.
no problem.
What comes to your mind when you think of crisis?
War, poverty, no food. That's it.
And what first comes to your mind when you think of a crisis?
Whenever I think of a crisis, I usually think of some sort of major turning point. Usually it goes to a worse point than a better point. Crisis is really kind of, from my profession at least, being a filmmaker and one of the person who's telling stories, it's usually something that propels someone into a very negative or a very positive state, usually for the worse.
Great, thank you, Sean.
Yeah.
What comes to your mind when you think of a crisis?
I think of something that needs immediate attention. I think like natural hazards, and then something that also causes a lot of panic among people.
All right, Jack, what comes to your mind when you think of crisis?
I would say like an emergency. Could be a big crisis or a small crisis. Something major, maybe like a relative dying, or I don't know, the world's going to war or something like that. Or could be a small crisis, like you forget your homework or something like that.
What comes to your mind when you think of a crisis?
I think of the COVID pandemic as a recent. I also think of 9/11.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
What comes to your mind when you think of a crisis?
Crisis probably like near in school shootings when it requires like people to panic and things have to go on lockdown.